In January 1980, there were no hard feelings on either side of the border when it was disclosed that Canada had helped 6 Americans escape from Tehran. Little has been reported about what led up to that escape in the early days of the American hostage crisis. But Mike Wallace now has learned that those 6, during the first half-dozen days following the seizure of the U.S. Embassy, were spurned by several American allies.
The surprise and relief at the homecoming of the 6 Americans obscured the frightening facts behind their hazardous journey. How had they gotten from the U.S. Embassy into Canadian hands? Their spokesman, Robert Anders, shed little light on that.
Because of the sensitivity of the situation, we know you will understand that we cannot take questions at this time.
The Canadian ambassador who had offered them asylum gave even fewer details about the dangers along the way.
Oh, it had its moments.
Its moments, indeed. We have pieced together accounts given us the past few days by the 6 Americans and by members of the diplomatic community. And from their stories, it becomes clear the Canadians were not the first to whom they turned, but a refuge of last resort. On the day of the takeover, while the mob poured over the front gate, 5 of the Americans escaped through the back door of the embassy compound. We'll explain later about the 6th. The 5 headed for the British Embassy, but saw a mob ahead and made their way instead to an American apartment in the area. Worried by the hatred that infects Tehran to this day, they telephoned the State Department and also Chargé Bruce Langan, who was under house arrest in the Iranian Foreign Ministry. He told the 5 to wait for help.
Robert Anders.
We assumed that would be over shortly, and I certainly hope so.
Consular officials Mark and Cora Lijek.
My feeling from almost the beginning was that we had to get to an embassy.
Consular officials Joseph and Kathleen Stafford.
We knew we'd have to look for some help.
Help came from Victor Tomseth, who was also under house arrest at the Foreign Ministry.
I had a friend at the British Embassy.
He arranged refuge for the 5 at the British Embassy's summer compound. But they stayed there for just 1 day and 1 night, a night on which the British compound downtown was overrun for 6 hours. Chargé Bruce Langan.
That fact caused them to be understandably concerned about a rumor getting out, a report getting out that the 6 were in their compound.
So obviously having to leave an embassy after having gotten there was kind of heartbreaking. It was as if there was really no place left to go.
So the next day, the British drove the 5 to the home of John Graves, an American held hostage in the U.S. Embassy. And there they waited for instructions from Washington or for offers of help from other embassies. None came. They waited through day 3 and 4 and 5. And finally, a call came from Langan and Tomseth to Anders.
And he said to me, well, I'm not so sure that we'll be able to call you anymore. So you're on your own, and good luck.
Did you suggest that they go to the Canadians?
No, they did that on their own.
Why would not the United States, why would not somebody at the State Department phone around?
They may have done that, I don't know.
The fact is, nobody did. Not Washington, not the British, not the French, not the Germans, none of our traditional allies. 2 days later, the 5 Americans were finally taken in by the Canadians, just 15 minutes before the militants arrived to check out the house where they'd been hiding. The 6th American who would eventually find his way to the Canadians was Agriculture Attaché Lee Schatz. He watched the embassy takeover from his office next door and ducked into the Swedish embassy in the same building. He slept with a Swedish flag as a blanket that first night and was moved to the home of a Swedish national that week. But in Tehran's ugly climate, after 18 days, the Swedish ambassador called the Canadian ambassador and said, "You have to take shots off our hands." And the Canadians did. Did other Western embassies know about the fact that there were 6 Americans at large in Iran?
There were some that were definitely sure there were 6 of us.
Though Schatz won't say it, only one other country offered him asylum, New Zealand.
I think there are a lot of interests that override the lives of a few people.
In other words, they did not want to jeopardize their own relationship with the Iranian government if it meant taking you and the other 5.
I think that definitely would have been part of any decision that was reached.
Canada's Ambassador Kenneth Taylor told us the whole episode reflected no credit on the diplomatic community.
Apparently, during the chaos after the takeover, the diplomatic system, in a sense, broke down. The diplomatic brotherhood broke down.
Entirely. With the exception of regional groups. We could not agree on even a very mildly worded statement to the foreign ministry.
Cyrus Vance was Secretary of State at the time of the embassy takeover.
It was an incredible act of valor and of friendship, and I will be forever grateful.
They, unlike some others, came forward and really volunteered to take these people in. Question: had you been faced with the choice, the dilemma that faced the Canadian government to take in, let's say, 6 Canadians or 6 British or 6 French or 6 Germans, under the circumstances, what would you have done?
I hope I would have done the same thing. I believe I would.